I'm Liz Faublis, and this is Currents. Pro-life activists prepare to converge on Washington, and we go into the deep to talk about that.
There is life there. People somehow make that secondary. We are dealing with human life.
Plus, what do Arab uprisings mean for religious freedom? Local conference looks for answers.
The fundamentalism's biggest enemy is freedom. Only freedom can defeat extremism.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Well, Monday's forecast for Washington, D.C., 56 degrees and raining, but that's not likely to dampen the spirits of the thousands of people who will be there for the March for Life. The event, which is happening for the 39th time, coincides with the anniversary of the Supreme Court's 1973 Roe v. Wade decision legalizing abortion across the U.S. This year, that anniversary falls on a Sunday, so the march will be held on Monday when Washington is open for business. Activists will urge the Supreme Court to overturn their earlier decision. The ultimate goal, bringing an end to abortion. To talk more about the march, the church's position on abortion, and much more, our news director Ed Wilkinson sat down with Brooklyn Bishop Nicholas DeMarcio for this week's Into the Deep.
Bishop, good to see you again.
Always good to be here.
Just a couple of days will be the annual March for Life, and many people here from the diocese in Brooklyn and Queens go down and participate in this. It's a good thing, I think, that we do this every year, even though it's been many years since that Supreme Court decision. Yeah. What's the value of this march?
Well, sometimes you need to witness to the country on issues that have political importance, but also we need to shore up ourselves. We have to not forget what we are about, the values we hold, and certainly abortion on demand, basically which is the policy of our country today, is something that we really need to change. And so the March for Life does show that witness and that political will to change a law which we believe is misguided.
Yeah. Do you sense a change in people's hearts?
Well, the polls have shown that more Americans now would be against abortion. Maybe not in all circumstances, but in general, there will be more against abortion than pro-abortion. The trend has been slowly turning in the other way. It's a little bit over 50% now that will be against abortion, which is quite a difference from, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, sure. And even recently, the Obama administration held up the plan to administer these Plan B over the counter, which would have incurred abortions for women. I mean, it's almost a little change, in the administration's mentality toward abortion.
Well, let's hope it goes beyond that, because at the same time they did withhold any change in the new healthcare law that will again force Catholic institutions to provide contraceptives and sterilization as part of their healthcare plan. So we're not happy with the administration on that.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen in this country? I mean, it's not likely that the law is going to change in the near future anyway, maybe someday.
Yeah.
But what we're looking for, I think, is a change of heart among people and among Americans. So what can we do as a church to help guide people and to help this change of heart?
Well, there's a lot of things. First of all, witnessing to the truth is important. Helping people who find themselves in desperate situations so that they have alternatives to abortion, and that's being done. What the Right to Life groups and many of the groups that assist women that are in difficult circumstances. I think there is enough help in the diocese that this can be done. But it is a change of mentality and change of heart, that getting back to the point that there is life there. People somehow make that secondary. We are dealing with human life. Mm-hmm. And when we're dealing with human life, obviously all benefit of the doubt is going to be given to human life, and not to convenience or not to any other consideration. But it is human life that we're dealing with, and we've got to make sure that we are doing all we can to preserve human life.
Mm-hmm. And in this diocese, you go on monthly prayer vigils with the helpers of God's precious infants, and you pray at the sites of abortions.
Right. If I'm not there every month, one of the other bishops would be there, so we try to cover this monthly prayer mass at a church nearby, an abortion clinic. I mean, it's incredible that every place there is an abortion clinic, we have a church nearby, and we can have a mass, and we can walk there. It's not that far. Unfortunately, you know, Brooklyn is in the state of New York has, I think, the highest or the second highest rate of abortion. So it is a particular problem for us.
So there's still a lot of work to do, and
There is.
I guess that's why people continue to march.
That they have to do.
Sure. Thanks so much again, Bishop, for
welcome.
being with us today.
And be sure to stick with Currents for complete coverage of the March for Life. And don't go anywhere, there's more Currents ahead. Less than a day before the South Carolina primaries, we'll get the latest from the remaining 4 Republican presidential candidates. That and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faubles. Coming up later, getting some clarity on the Arab Spring. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Well, judging by the tone of last night's Republican presidential debate in North Charleston, South Carolina, it may be safe to say the gloves remain officially off. With Saturday's critical primary looming and Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich both leading in the South Carolina polls, topics like Mitt Romney's position on abortion were front and center.
I mean, Governor Romney has said that he had an experience in a lab and became pro-life, and I accept that. After he became pro-life, Romney Care does pay for tax-paid abortions. Romney Care has written into it Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in the country, by name, does not have any right to life group written into it. He did appoint pro-abortion judges.
I'm a pro-life governor. I am a pro-life individual. And I have to be honest here. It is, this is not the time to be doubting people's words or questioning their integrity. I'm pro-life. By the way, is there any possibility that I've ever made a mistake in that regard? I didn't see something that I should have seen? Possibly. But you can count on me as President of the United States to pursue a policy that protects the life of the unborn, whether here in this country or overseas.
The candidates will face off for the third contest for the presidential nomination on Saturday. Last night, GOP candidates also tackled the immigration issue.
If we treat people like that differently than we do with a mother who, in a desperate situation, goes out and shoplifts or does something and gets thrown in jail, what do we say? That we're going to treat people in this country who do things for their family differently than those who are here illegally? I don't think so.
I actually agreed, I think, with what you just said. Which is, I believe those people who've come here illegally should not be given a preferential path to become permanent residents or citizens of this country.
Then you get down to the question of people already here. I believe in what I just described, most of them will go home. The one group I singled out, and we do have a lively debate on this up here. There are people who've been here 25 years. They've been working, they've been paying their bills, they're married, they have children, they may have grandchildren, they may be in your church. Now, I don't think we're going to deport grandmothers and grandfathers who have 25 years of networking and relationships in a community.
We're all against illegal immigration, but I think what we fail to do is look at the incentives, and it has a lot to do with economics. There's an economic incentive for them to come, for immigrants to come, but there's also an incentive for some of our people in this country not to take a job that's a low-paying job. You're not supposed to say that, but that is true.
Now, immigration is an issue that's been front and center for U.S. bishops who have called on the federal government to repair the country's immigration laws. And over in Rome, praise and gratitude from U.S. bishops for Pope Benedict's latest statement on the need to protect religious liberty. Benedict delivered the address yesterday to bishops from the Mid-Atlantic region who were in Rome for their ad limina visits. Cardinal-designate Timothy Dolan, president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, saying the Pope spoke eloquently and powerfully on the threats to the Church's moral witness in public life. Well, a new study shows the worldwide abortion rate appears to be stalling. According to the study from the World Health Organization and the Guttmacher Institute, the number of abortions remained virtually unchanged from 2003 to 2008. Now, the study shows that close to 44 million abortions take place annually, with the highest rate in Eastern Europe. Turning to the Philippines, police are investigating the death of a priest whose body was discovered floating in a river. The priest, a missionary from Australia, founded a religious society that had built congregations in the Philippines and Kenya. The police tell the Sydney Morning Herald that the priest had been inspecting land that the church was interested in buying. He was last seen alive near the river where his body was discovered. Meanwhile, sources in the Sudan say 2 kidnapped priests are alive and negotiations are ongoing for their release. The source tells the Vatican news agency Fidesz that the kidnappers are part of an anti-government militia in South Sudan. The priests were taken on Sunday evening from their parish. And from Nigeria, an archbishop there is denouncing text messages that threaten new attacks on Christians. According to a report from Fidesz, the texts indicate that attacks will happen on a specific day in the northern part of Nigeria. The Archbishop of Abuja says people need to continue to be vigilant and security conscious. He says the church appreciates the protection provided by the government security forces. Well, now turning to Ireland, where a Catholic lay group is urging their country's government to reopen its Vatican embassy. Reports say the group, known as Ireland Stand Up, met this week with members of Ireland's parliament and representatives from Ireland government ministers. The Irish government announced in early November that it was closing its Vatican embassy for economic reasons. The decision came following reports of widespread abuse at Catholic institutions in Ireland. Now, back in this country, a Minnesota parish holds a vigil for a couple missing from the cruise ship that capsized off the coast of Italy. Reporter Jana Shorta has that story.
Every single day, Barb and Jerry Heil went to Mass at St. Pius X in White Bear Lake. So it only makes sense that it is in this church their friends came to do exactly what Barb and Jerry would have done in times of trouble, in a time of despair. They gathered to pray.
Give us this day our daily bread. The most important thing we should all learn from their lives is the great example they are to us all.
Even Barb and Jerry's family, who have so much to deal with, came to gather with this family that is so much their own.
We still have hope. We have hope for anything that will come. Whatever God's plan is, we're at peace with that, and we're good.
I just want to thank you all for your thoughts and prayers over the past few days. This has been such a difficult time for all those who know my grandparents, and your prayers have truly made a difference.
The hymns were timeless, the prayers very simple. Barb and Jerry, friends said, would have planned it just that way.
Jerry and Barb do not desire to be in the limelight. They rather be subtle, kind of behind the scenes.
But no matter how shy, how far from center stage the couple seemed to want to be, one thing everyone agreed on, there was no Jerry without Barb, no Barb without Jerry. So if there was any solace to be found in this church, it was that perhaps somewhere, somehow, that togetherness remains true.
Brother Jerry and Lady Barbara, what a beautiful couple. Or if you saw Jerry, Barb was not far away.
And that report from Jana Shorter. Well, Italian lawmakers are reportedly pressuring the Catholic Church to pay taxes on its commercial property. According to Bloomberg News, the church must pay tax on buildings that are designated as, quote, purely commercial. An Italian newspaper reports that talks are ongoing between President Mario Monti and the head of Italy's Bishops' Conference. And the Archdiocese of New York has suspended a priest after discovering he fathered a child. Father Casimir Mungaho had been serving at St. Stephen I Martyr Parish in Warwick. The Archdiocese says it was not aware of Mungaho's child when the priest was ordained last year. The Archdiocese says that after announcing the suspension, it learned that the child was born while Mungaho was a seminarian. And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. Just ahead, an inside look at uprisings in one Middle Eastern country. Welcome back. Violent outbreaks continue in Syria, where protesters have taken to the streets to call for the resignation of President Bashar al-Assad. According to a report from Voice of America, the latest news comes as Arab League representatives continue their work ensuring the Syrian government is not using violence to crack down on the protesters. Meanwhile, members of Syria's religious communities came together this week to highlight the tolerance shown among the country's various faiths. A Catholic official says that Christians and Muslims have always lived together peacefully in the country. It is anything but peaceful on the streets of Syria, though. CNN's Nick Robertson reports from the town of Kisweh.
As the Arab League monitors arrive, so anti-government protesters emerge from side streets and shuttered stores. A ruckus band of 100 or so besieging them with complaints of government brutality. This mother shouts at them, "They killed my son, kept him in the morgue for a month. I plead to God and to you, give me justice, give me my rights." This is Kisweh, a small, poor town, about half an hour's drive from the capital. Away from the protest, this man tells us why there are so few demonstrators. This is a small town, 15,000 people, he says. It's isolated. The army can surround us in 5 minutes. You ask me why no one is here. 500 men ran away. Others are arrested. The army has 13 checkpoints, he says. We can't count them, but just down the street we see this. You get some idea of how tight security is here. One checkpoint, another one here, a third one over here, and down here, another checkpoint, sandbag bunkers at the side of the road. 4 army checkpoints to control this one small traffic intersection. That's how tight security is. Impossible to verify everything we hear. What's really interesting here, this is a bullet hole we're told was a shot fired by the army down the street at the protesters. But if you look at the other side of the box here, you can see the exit where the bullet came out, but you can also see these small pepper marks, shotgun marks. They look like shotgun pellet marks, and it gives the impression that the protesters down here were firing back shotgun rounds, fired back at the soldiers up the street. What is clear today is that tempers are frayed. This is a town on edge. A man is caught by the crowd. They turn on him with a vengeance. They're accusing that man of being a policeman, and they've literally chased him down the streets. For a minute there, it looked like it was going to be mob justice. People were jumping on him. But it does seem as if he's been able to get away and run off down the street. But they said he was a policeman. The writing on the wall, a cry for help, from a town where they say no one is listening.
And that report from CNN's Nick Robertson. Stay tuned, there's more Currents ahead. When we return, a couple of experts share their insights on the Arab Spring.
I have witnessed myself Muslims and the Christians making chains, making walls, using their bodies to build a mosque or a church.
Well, before the break, we got an up-close look at the situation on the streets of Syria. The protests there are part of what is known as the Arab Spring uprisings happening all over the Arab world. But why are the protests happening, and what will it mean for the rest of the world? At last weekend's New York encounter in Manhattan, a couple of experts shared their insights and gave those who listened a unique perspective on the situation and its greater implications.
Do we depend on God or on power? We make a choice whether or not to believe that God exists and that God is relevant to us. We can make that same choice with power.
In the New York encounter, we try to keep our eyes open on whatever is happening around us. And what is happening in the Arab countries is pretty big. We will have Wael Farouk, who's an Egyptian, a Muslim, and Mr. Anderson, who's a former CIA officer, an expert on the Middle East. And let's see what they have to tell us, how they read whatever is happening there, above and beyond what the media pass on to us.
In this revolution, a lot of things have changed during the revolution. Unity between Muslims and the Christians, for example. I have witnessed myself Muslims and the Christians making chains, making walls, using their bodies to build a mosque or a church to celebrate Friday prayer or Sunday Mass.
I don't believe the fear that somehow, because these are countries where the vast majority of people are Muslim, that these will become centers of places where people hate us. It is not about us. It's about their wanting freedom and their wanting governments that serve and protect them. We should support them and we should celebrate them.
In my opinion, the fundamentalism's biggest enemy is freedom. Only freedom can defeat extremism.
I think the Arab world is on the way toward governments that provide better governance, less tyranny, and not governments that are going to be hateful and dangerous to us.
I think before listening to our speakers, the information and the perspective that I had on the rebellion and on the protests in Egypt in particular and in the Arab world were colored by the way in which the media presented them.
I just think that the human dynamic of seeing the people in the streets behind the graphs was really interesting. I guess that's what I'm taking home from this.
Ultimately, what we would want as Christians, Muslims, any other religion is a freedom of expression to practice our religion. And so in its ideal, the Arab Spring should be giving everyone this.
These human values are what God passed to us to keep His presence in our everyday life. Thank you.
And we have even more stories from last weekend's New York encounter. Check them out over at our website, currentsny.net. And be sure to follow us on Twitter and connect with us on Facebook. That is all for this edition of Currents. Coming up on Monday's show, it is the March for Life in Washington, D.C., and we'll talk with the Tablet's Antonina Jelinska from the march. Until then, I'm Liz Faublas. Thank you for watching and have a great night.